Do good work is not a label, but a way of living. It is the constant and diligent effort to achieve a new level of excellence in one's own life. It is the hidden inner beauty behind the struggle to achieve excellence. It's not perfect, but imperfect. It is the effort, discipline, and focus that often goes unnoticed. The goal of Do Good Work is to highlight that drive. The guests I have on this show emulate this drive in their own special way. You'll be able to apply new ideas into your own life by learning from them. We will also have one-on-one episodes with me where we'll dive into my own experience with entrepreneurship and leadership. Every episode is designed to provide you with ideas that you can apply and grow in excellence in all areas of your life, business, and career.
Today on the show, we have Julian Roberts. Julian is an executive and leadership coach with a background in commercial and sales. He has held several senior strategic commercial positions for global multinational corporations, including Heinz, Yoplait, and Johnson & Johnson. And he's also helped run family-run businesses and managing brands. Commercially astute with strong negotiation and leadership skills, along with a proven track record within the UK and international sectors, Julian has extensive hands-on experience in strategic business development and a proven track record of achievement in rapidly changing organizations. He's currently on a mission to unlock the potential of 100,000 leaders. Julian, thank you so much for being on, man.
Well, thank you for inviting me on, Raul. I'm really pleased to be here.
Julian, one of the things that I've been looking at, and you've seen this as well on your side, with a lot of the shifts that have been happening with the pandemic, with the new normal, with remote teams, with everything that is added on top of running an organization that is already, I don't want to say quite stressful, but it's a lot of things happening at once. I think one of the cornerstones and one of the key habits or key characteristics is resilience in teams and resilience in leadership. I'd like to dive into with you, what are some of the key strategies or the key insights that you've seen teams be able to build and also be able to execute in order to become resilient?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I think it's, we are, as we all know, we are in uncertain times, and that coined phrase of unprecedented times. And even more so, we need to build resilience. And just to make a point on it, because I think people have this view of resilience is that some people are more resilient than others. Mm-hmm. And in some ways it can be true. It's the fact that somebody has decided to either learn the skill and then use that skill when the opportunity for adversity or challenge comes our way. Mm-hmm. So for me, resilience is having that capacity to overcome. And, whether you're in a business context in terms of navigating, your sales revenue, navigating challenges with your employees, or in a personal context, whether you're doing an ultra marathon and the adversity of, cramping, this is personal experience, and feeling sick because of your salts all over the place in your body in terms of losing salts, and it's really hot, and trying to keep going to the end. So there's a resilience in that.
It's incredible, yeah. I've only done Tough Mudder, man, not ultra marathons, man. That's crazy.
Yes. So resilience is for me, I call it as a life skill, and I try and teach my children it as well, because it's really important to have. Because, just forget the pandemic for a moment. We are always going to face adversity. Yeah. That's life. And it's not that it's the world doomed and everything's negative. It's just a reality that we will always face things along the way, and in our journey of life. So in terms of bringing that into a context of a business or an organization, rather than giving you a whole top 10, 20 tips, there's some things I think that are really really important in helping you navigate that uncertainty and sort of building that sort of resilience. And one of the things I talk to a lot of clients and organization leaders is getting to that place where you really know your purpose, where you really know your mission or your why, whatever it may be. We talk a lot about this, but actually it's a really important sort of anchor in what you're doing in your life. If you're on a journey and going from A to B, at any point along the way, you're going to have some difficulty. as long as you know your B, which is where you're going to and why you're getting there, you will then look for ways to explore opportunities, collaborations, different way of doing things. You become more resourceful because you've got this why, got this sense of purpose, sense of motivation. And I think, I get lots of clients where they have struggled, and I've had clients recently where they've sort of struggled with trying to motivate themselves, motivate their teams.
Mm-hmm.
And we've got back to, what their purpose is, what their purpose in terms of what they're trying to generate, what they're trying to do, bigger than just making money and everything. I'm talking a higher purpose than that. And actually getting back to that starts to create that energy, because the reason you got a purpose is something that is motivational, something that's unique and specific to you.
Mm-hmm.
So reminding yourself of that will give you that motivation. It will give you that energy, and start to do that. And I've got teams to then, whether that's a mission in a team, is to go back to it and, round the table or round the Zoom as it is
Mm-hmm.
now, is get back to that mission, look at it, dwell on it, think about it. How else can we do it? Because the fact of life, it doesn't stop what that mission is. It's not change. What's changed is how you go about it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the difference.
Readapting it.
Yeah, and so you, instead of face-to-face, it's on Zoom. Instead of going for customer B, it's going for customer C. So the how has changed, and then that's the difference. That's changed, and that starts to create a more of a resilient approach to things. So then you're not so caught up on, what the old normal was, or we always done it this way. No, our purpose is still the same, and we're still pressing on for that. It's just a different approach, and that will make your teams resourceful, make your teams more think outside the box, because they're just focused on delivering on the purpose or on the mission, whatever you want to call it, or vision of your company. And that's one of the sort of anchor points I always get sort of my individual clients and my corporate clients back to, really.
And I really do appreciate that, because it can be overlooked how simple that is. Now, the key thing though, and this is something that it's also maybe a stumbling block, is how do you encourage those active collaborations, like from the business side? To give you a real example, as opposed to teams, just leaders telling the teams from the top down, you have to focus on your purpose. It's like, how have you seen companies effectively create safe spaces so that communication can happen cohesively, so that we can go back to purpose and then brainstorm in innovative ways to apply different tactics or strategies to get back to the purpose, to really become resilient? But I think it all starts with the conversation. What have you seen work well? And maybe this might be different depending on the size of the team, but let's say we're talking about a department, 15, 20 people. How are we able to come up and create those safe environments for us to actually come together and have that active discussion about purpose?
Yeah, and I think we're talking sort of psychological safety here, which is, another sort of building block of resilience, where people feel safe to share, and a safe place to fail, and that's it goes back to the leader, and like anything in life, it's led by example. And I've encouraged lots of leaders right now who I spoke to back 6-7 months ago, who literally, sort of rabbit caught in headlights, who were like frightened basically, and felt they needed to know all the answers. Because I think in the old world, and perhaps in just, I suppose, archaic way of thinking of leadership, people think leaders know everything and should know everything and know the way. And it's completely flawed, because we are flawed. And even more so now, we're in a place where things are completely left field and nobody knows. And I think it's getting yourself as a leader in a place where you are comfortable not knowing, and being vulnerable with that. Because that vulnerability, if it's genuine, I'm not talking fake, false, made up, acting sort of vulnerability, is picked up from people, and their subconscious feel it, and they sense, oh, this leader's vulnerable. He doesn't know, which is fine, because we don't know. Actually, that will start to create a dynamic of, they'll sort of open up a little bit more. They'll be willing to share their own failings, because this leader doesn't know it all, doesn't know all the answers. And also then that starts to open up the dialogue of then how do we navigate through this. I sort of go back to, I don't know, Brené Brown, who talks about, stepping up and getting into the arena and sort of that vulnerability, that sort of courageous leadership where you're willing to go into the arena with the mindset of, do you know what, I may win, I may fail, but I'm here and I'm invisible. And I always think of, if you're on a sort of sailing ship and you're in a storm and it's all over the place and we've lost sort of our compass, we don't entirely know where we're going. But if you're as an employee or as a member of that ship, if you can at least get to see at the helm that leader's there, he might not entirely know where he's going, but he's the visible and he's going for it and he's there trying to help, then that produces comfort and a sense of bringing it together and a sense of collaboration. And I think that's really important. And I think it's that psychological safety where then you start to then develop. And obviously there's the practical strategies of how you then get people thinking about the purpose and everything else. But you've got to create that environment where, do you know what, it's okay to fail. Do you know what, your idea may be great, may not be great. We're going to give some great feedback on that and we're going to run with it. And I have a mindset, if it fails, it's just feedback of we have to do something differently. We have to try again and we have to try a different way of going. That's what it is. And if you lead by example and you demonstrate that vulnerability, then other people will start to do that as well. And you'll start to create that more collaborative, open, trusty team then. And then you start to feel safe. And then when you feel safe, you then start to share and then you start to support each other. And then you start to come up with some great ideas. And then you start to push the boundaries because people feel safe. They can go a little bit to the edge. In fact, I've done this before. I feel uncomfortable, but do you know what? I'm in an environment it's okay. I can, and that's when companies really start to thrive and to grow and to really sort of push the envelope of sort of exploring new avenues and areas they've never explored before. Because this is the moment, and I spoke to, Coach Khan the other day. This is the moment that anything goes. We are in a time when you can try anything.
Prudently and strategically.
We are in a place where you just go for it. And not that you're going to say, we're going to blame the pandemic, but we're in a moment where, when there's massive uncertainty, massive sort of things shifting, financial crisis, Uber was created. Other big organizations came out of it. And I think there's going to be entrepreneurs, there's going to be businesses that will pivot into a place because they had to go and thought, do you know what, let's do it.
No, and I think, so going back to the original inception of being vulnerable as a leader first, and then having the team become comfortable to be able to share and even get, like you mentioned, pushing the boundary, like, hey, this is not how we used to do things. This is completely different, but being able to create that environment for innovation and collaboration. What are some of the practical ways that we can suggest leaders in order to become more authentic, really, just to be able to have that initial conversation? Is that as easy as getting on a stand-up Zoom call every Monday or on the first Monday and just say like, hey guys, like, this is how I feel, this is what we're doing? How do you continue the dialogue? What do you suggest leaders do to first initiate the dialogue? How easy, or what are some of the tactics that you've seen work well? And how do you continue the dialogue so it doesn't just begin and end with that one call and then it's over after that?
It's right. The key thing there is consistency. In all that we do is be consistent. And I think it's the visibility piece and how you outwork the visibility in your organization. And we know we're in times of, it's all virtual, but there's ways of doing it, and just being mindful of how you go about that, and whether you're in the context of a wider organization where you're doing more like a town hall type discussion and sharing stuff. And it's just being aware of your audience in terms of what you can say, what you can share, and then obviously elements of dialogue. And that's the key thing, is allowing dialogue. And whether, if it's a big team, you may want to ask for people to give you questions prior and then you share. or it depends how you facilitate. It's just the dynamics of it, obviously. But in a small team, I would always, be visible, do it as regular as you think fits. Ask the team what they want. What's the best way of doing it? Do they prefer a Zoom with a camera, or actually a Zoom with just just the audio, so we can chat and not have to feel so intense about looking at each other? Do things ask about, some personal things, whether you make some more social interaction. I don't know, it's difficult. It feels a bit false, a bit forced sometimes, but trying to create some social context to that, get somebody in the team to lead that rather than you leading everything. Whether you do like a quiz, whether you do some sort of, let's have a drink, share your weekend. But again, be authentic. Don't try and force it. I had one leader who's trying to do it every day and was trying to create visibility and like a lunchtime, almost like a lunchtime chat as they would in the office. People were just not turning up. And I just said, well, possibly because it became a bit of an out of season, not appropriate, and felt a bit forced and false.
Like you have to show up, yeah.
Yeah, why don't you ask your team what they want? And why don't you get somebody who's a bit more up for it to lead it or to come up with the ideas? Because if a peer leads it, they'll root for them and they'll be there and they'll chit chat and say, oh, well, I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to do a little thing Friday, and they'll turn up. But also I would say is making sure you're having those one-on-one conversations. And
yes,
really genuine. And one question I've asked, and I've been asked myself over years, is instead of just saying to somebody, how are you? I say, how are you today? So it puts a marker in a moment, and people tend to stop and think and go, well, actually, I'm really finding this difficult, or I've had a real bad weekend, or whatever it may be. And it's creating that moment. And I think you've got to get individually, not just on a team approach. So, and use the best way of doing that, whether it's just a phone call, whether it's just a Zoom call, whether it's just if you are meeting in person at some context, get some one-on-one time. And also in that, and again, it's picking up, people get surprised at how much our subconscious picks up intent. If your intent, in fact, my intent when I see you, Raul, is just to say that glancingly, how are you? But really, I want to get on my agenda. You will feel it. But if I have my intent, and my primary purpose to speak to you right now is to find out how you are, what you're at, and how I can help you, you will feel that. Your subconscious will feel it. And people start to open up, and you start to be more genuine, and those relationships are better. And then people feel cared for, listened to. And that goes on to the whole listening stuff as well, where it's really listening, not asking a question. Just like you're listening right now, you're listening to me because you've asked me a question, and I feel listened to, so I feel valued in that context. And therefore, it's important to allow people the space to listen. And the more you listen without an answer or a question or an agenda point, they will open up and feel valued. And that's what you want to do. So it's the bigger bit in terms of the sort of bigger meetings, get other team members to do things, to collaborate, be visible, down to the one-on-one, down to listening in all that context.
And then also, like you mentioned, and I want to bring it back specifically to a key, strategy they mentioned is bringing in a champion and having someone of the peers, like whoever wants to step up to do that, to facilitate this, not because you're going to hand it off to them, but because they're going to help you in the leadership piece. Now, let's dive a little bit closer when it comes to, we've done the authenticity. We've worked with the teams. We told them, like, this is what we're doing. This is what we know. This is what we don't know. This is what we need to learn together. We've asked for their feedback, and the role of the leader at that point is one of two things, right? Provide with the resources to get the jobs or whatever needs to get done, and two, provide the training in order to actually execute whatever they need to do so that people feel empowered, they feel heard, and they can actually execute and feel productive or feel like they're moving the needle. When we have these authentic conversations in the beginning, when, like, obviously the authenticity, when we hear and get feedback, I see that there can be a lot of room to drop the ball. It's like, cool, we've had this one-on-one, you feel heard, but then I don't want that just to end there. How have you instilled strategies for that teams can take that one-on-one and being able to apply it to the tangible daily execution? Because leaders still need to drive the ship.
They do, and that's important. For me, it goes back to accountability and responsibility, and making it very clear whenever you, whether it's in terms of empowering somebody, you are clear with what you're empowering them with. You're clear with your expectations, and you qualify and check that expectations, so it's, it's heard how you want it to be heard. It's clear in terms of boundaries, what resource they might need, what support they would need, and also the delivery. And it's been absolutely with clarity on that as you empower, because people see, and I think some people get confused with empowering people. People think it's just delegating.
Or throwing resources.
Or throwing something.
Throw the resources, like, you got it, you can take it, right? And that's the most misconception I've seen.
And we know some people who are incredibly proactive, get it, know you, are in sync with you. You can throw something at them, and they just go off and they just do it, and they know because you've worked with them perhaps for years. But generally, you have to be clear with what you want, what are your expectations, why you want it, when you want it, and then you qualify all that in a conversation, and then you look at in terms of buying in, again, the commitment of when they're going to do it. And rather than saying, I want it done by Friday, you obviously want there may be a specific deadline that has to be done, but you want them to buy into it, and making sure that they go, okay, I can do that. And you say, can you do it by Friday? Is there anything else you need that will, if they say, oh, I'm not so sure about Friday, well, actually, if I gave you this other resource, could you get it done by Friday for me? Yeah, that's fine. Then you gain that commitment. And that's really important. And then it's, depending on the task, projects, and the person, you may check in at points, depending on, and ask them for check-in points, but allowing them to bring that feedback to you and say, this is where we're at, or I just need a bit more resource here, or I perhaps need a bit more time, and there's a dialogue, and there's some rationale behind it. And so it's important not to take your hand off, in the sense, and that's, but it's doing it in a way that you're not micromanaging, because you don't want to be just on people. And it may be that you schedule specific events, catch-ups that will just facilitate you talking about that project, and it could be over a period of time with them, however, depending on what it is. I know myself, I used to have one-to-ones with my teams every 2 weeks, and in that context, the agenda is driven by them, but there's also certain things that they'll be working on, and I would just, through KPIs, through expectations,
to be able to see.
Yeah, so it's just keeping that visibility, and at the end of the day, it's been relational with all this. It's not been, and seeing somebody as a task to do. See somebody as a person and as a relationship. And then if you look, and if you then approach, and this is how, again, it's that servant leadership approach, where if you think, how can I help him or her do a better job, then you're in service of them. Then again, A, they feel it, and B, your mindset's far more giving, and far more helpful, far more elevating of that individual. And you're surprising how much you'll get out of that team, because they'll just start to feel it and know that you're supporting, and then they start to get in sync with you, and then that's where it becomes a lot more dynamic and a lot more fun, interesting, and quite explosive in terms of what you can deliver, and you'll be surprised. And also, one thing to bear in mind when you do empower people is allowing people to do it in the way they think best, because why have you hired them? Why have you paid them for their expertise? So you don't tell them how to do it. You may have some expectations of, when and what, but how they go about it, frankly, if they're part of your team, is up to them. And that's where you get the creativity, and that's where you get the sense of they've done it in a way that was better than me. I hadn't even thought of that.
Mm-hmm.
Or a way that was quicker and more productive because you've allowed them to do the best way. So that's important as well.
And I think that I want to talk about 2 points. The first is when you discuss that looking at your teammate as an individual, as a person first, and not just like a task machine second. I think it's really important to do that because it kind of hits the common rebuttal, or maybe could be a consequence of asking a team, what do you need? How can I help you more? Either they'll tell you they don't need anything and they do a poor job, or this is like, not everyone, but, or the teammate might start taking advantage, like, oh, well, actually, I don't think Friday will work. Maybe next week. Or maybe I don't think, like, they start playing with the loose. But when you mentioned about being more relationship based, more focused on the giving, more focused on actually creating collaborative and safe environments, I think that can hit all those points and reduce them because you're creating an environment where people want to show up and they want to do their best work. And I think that is significantly, and that's all driven by leadership. So when it comes to the teams not performing things well, the things aren't being done right, I think it's always to look at what is the leadership doing and how have they created that kind of environment, because the actions are a consequence of the environment. And the second piece, and this is actually kind of interesting because if you know me or talking about the book, I always help teams in order to create some sort of system or structure around how they do their business. But I also like the ingenuity of having creativity flow for not telling a teammate, this is how you must do it. It's like, this is the expectations. This is how we have done it. What's your spin on it? And I think giving them that empowerment kind of brings new color, more taste, different flavor into what the business already has, and as they grow. Cool.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's where, as a leader, that's where you got to feel comfortable with a little bit of risk, because, but I always coin it, it's a risk to truly empower, but it's also a risk to hold people back and micromanage them. Mm-hmm. And so when you go off and say, I want you to go from here to Oxford and here's £10, and rather than telling you to go on the train or to go by car, they decide to go by bike, and through it they find things and get more insights and more interesting journey, and they get there in the timescale that you've asked them to do. But they meet people on the way and they get more collaborations, they learn things, and suddenly you've got something more dynamic and more productive, as you say, more colorful. Mm-hmm. And that's quite liberating within teams.
Yeah, and that's where either real problems or different problems to different solutions. Actually, or if we can edit this out, that's where real solutions to different problems comes in. Like you talked about in the beginning, kind of circling back, mission, like what's the mission? What are we actually doing? And then building resilience by solving different problems, in a unique way with a unique team, and knowing that you can solve them together. I think that is a key component to pretty much becoming resilient, but also balancing, like you mentioned, the risk. And I think that's a great way of saying it, balancing risk between the micro as well as balancing too much of over empowering teams. Cool. Well, Julian, to switch gears a little bit, I'm curious, what got you really to work with leaders and being able to build resilient teams? What was it that you saw in the corporate world that made you want to switch over to this side?
Yes. So having spent 20 years in sort of corporate world, managing sort of teams, and predominantly working in the sort of sales and commercial world within the food industry, I had a point in my life 4 or 5 years ago where myself and my wife were considering fostering and wanted to sort of pursue that. I've already got 3 children as well. Mm-hmm. And we wanted to, I guess, create some flexibility and sort of fluidity with our lives that would help facilitate that. And also alongside that, I started to realize that if I look back on my career, I got generally more excited when I unlocked a behavior that created some impact for an individual than just winning a client or winning a listing in a customer. Mm-hmm. And start to realize that actually I quite like this, working with people, working with leaders, and unlocking potential, which ties in with fostering as well. So there's almost those come. So based on that, I then set out a career to then go on my own 3.5 years ago, where I then not only started to set up a business consultancy, I then trained as a coach, executive coach, to sort of get the skills that I'd sort of been using, but to really hone it. And I'd always had a passion for leadership, passion for those individuals, and started on that track. And ever since then, I've been all about unlocking people's potential, seeing people one-on-one or in teams, and getting to a place where they get that light bulb moments, where they get the aha moments, or smashing down limiting beliefs that perhaps has held them back for years, and suddenly they're flying. That really is what I do and love and buzz with. And then the resilience piece, I guess I've been thinking over the last year about it, getting involved in it. I'm fascinated by the human brain and behavior, so much so now I'm doing a master's in psychology to try and expand my learning. And I just love this whole thing about resilience, and I do ultra marathons, and there's something about this sort of pursuing something, over a long period of time, against difficulties, and it just got it from a personal point of view. I quite liked it, and so I started to explore it, understand it, and then obviously it became quite a little bit of a thing in the last 6 months, because it's what we need. And the fact is, we talk in life about, life's not about a sprint, it's about a marathon. Well, to be honest, now I think it's more like an ultra marathon. It's not being negative, it's just being a bit more longer term, and you need tools, you need resources, you need ways to deal with it. Fact of life is, and that's what I love doing. And it all ties back to that, helping people unlock their potential, helping them navigate difficulties, and be more resilient as an individual and stroke culture, and therefore as a business. And so that's where my passion came from, and I love it. And I do it myself as much as anything else. I have to try and make sure I'm in that space as well. So I'm learning every day from my own business and from a personal point of view as well.
Oh, I love that. And that's incredible. I think, Julian, what's the best place for our listeners to go and thank you for this episode and reach out to you?
Best place would be go to LinkedIn. You can find me on LinkedIn. I also have a website, julianrobertsconsulting.com, and then you find everything there as well.
Wonderful. And we'll have those links in the show notes as well. Julian, thank you again, man.
Brilliant. Thank you, Raul. Appreciate the time. Thank you.